There is no shortage of speakers in this world. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of great speakers. So you need to understand as a speaker, how do you make sure you stand out? What makes you unique?
Hey, I'm Lisa Hugo, and I am obsessed with helping other people find their voices so they can go out and take on the world, be seen as an authority, an expert, and grow their business by sharing that knowledge and expertise with others. Now, I studied performing arts, and I spent 20 years of my career traveling the world as a professional singer-songwriter. I teach you the secrets to speak up and be heard, overcome your fears, and then use these skills to build a business and a life that you love and that could change both your own life and the lives of others. This is your one-stop shop for all things that are going to help you to build a life on your terms. This is Impact Through Voice. Well, welcome back to the Impact Through Voice podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Hugo, and I'm very excited about today's guest because I know he's going to have a ton of value to share with you, especially if you're an aspiring speaker or an aspiring entrepreneur who wants to get a message out to the world. I'm sitting here with Gautam Ganglani, and he is a speaker, he's an author, and he manages speakers and helps them with their marketing to get their message out to the wider audience. So let's just dive straight in. Welcome to the podcast, Gautam.
Thank you so much, Lisa. An absolute pleasure and privilege to be with you today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, same. You know, I heard you on a podcast with Kelly Lundberg. Now, Kelly's been on my show as well. And the whole conversation I thought was just so relevant to my audience that I had to invite you onto the show. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
My pleasure, Lisa. An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Great. So I want to dive in first with what makes a great speaker?
Well, that's an open-ended question, but what makes a great speaker is a speaker that adds value, that is memorable, and has clear, actionable takeaways that the audience can apply back into their lives, because that's where the reinforcement of that learning sticks. You know, so it's really about being inspiring, being memorable, and providing value that can be applied in the world post the event, and that's what brings the speaker repeat inquiries and brings them back again and again. That's a short version of that.
How did you get into this industry?
Well, our company, Right Selection, is a 30-year-old family legacy. It's a father and son family business. And the journey started with a bookstore in Dubai 30 years ago, actually.
Oh, wow.
It was the only non-fiction bookstore. In those days, it was predominantly fiction and children's books that were selling. So to have a non-fiction bookstore in those days, it made it into the front news of the Gulf News tabloid, self-help bookstore now in Dubai. You know, we had the books which really help personal and professional transformation. So your Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Jack Canfield, John Gray, Deepak Chopra, to the business authors of, Marshall Goldsmith, Stephen Covey, Robin Sharma, to name a few. So the business really started with the bookstore, and we helped companies build a library of these non-fiction books because they want to create a culture of learning and encourage people to read. So that was really the first 10 years of the business.
Interesting.
We then said, my dad and myself always asked us this question: what new value can we bring to our active clients? Because, you're bringing the books, but what new value? That led on to audiobooks because people preferred to listen to audios, which obviously today has moved to podcasts like yours, and videos, which obviously have moved to YouTube. But that was the sort of the learning world. And then it led to, how about we bring the authors of these books for live events, which led to how do we select which authors are great speakers? And ultimately, it's which books are selling well, because that means there's an aspiration to the content of those authors' books. And then people are excited to meet the author and learn from the author in person. And that's what developed the public seminar side of the business, in bringing authors who are speakers for live events.
Right.
So that's really the nature of the business.
So talking about authors coming to speak.
Yes.
Now, I know not all authors are good at speaking.
Absolutely.
In fact, they fear it, they shy away from it.
Right.
Have you experienced that in some of the people that you've invited?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, not all authors are great speakers, and not all great speakers are authors at the same time. Having said that, that's the distinction of If you can be a great speaker who's also an author, then you are definitely one step ahead of most of the players out there. I mean, we have some great speakers out there, and they have been stagnant in their careers because they haven't got a book.
Right.
So they're doing well, but they're not able to grow because they've not been seen as an authority of that, because, you know, author to some extent is the short form for being an authority of that spoken subject matter. So, you know, being a great author, having your book available builds credibility, gives you personal brand positioning, as we know from our great dear friend Kelly. And once you have that, if you have the skills to then be a great speaker, it then makes you marketable. Ultimately, as an agency who manages speakers, you know, having an author who's a great speaker is a great combination that sort of we would look for.
Okay. Not all speakers have a book.
Yes.
Are they still interesting for you to potentially help them to get off the ground as a speaker? What is it that you look for in a great speaker?
No, fantastic question, Lisa. So when we are identifying speakers, if we're proactively looking for speakers, then, you know, 9 times out of 10, we're looking for a speaker who's got a fan following in some communication. And yes, the book is the obvious one. If someone has a great podcast with followers, if they have a great YouTube channel, if they have a great blog, if they're renowned on LinkedIn, so they need to be, you know, well known as a thought leader in one of those platforms, if not all of them. You know, a Marshall Goldsmith has 1.7 million followers on LinkedIn.
Right.
And there are others who have similar following, but they've not written a book. But because of their LinkedIn following, they are a brand. They are regarded as a thought leader, a micro celebrity of sort, which makes it easy for them to stand out. There is no shortage of speakers in this world. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of great speakers. So you need to understand as a speaker, how do you make sure you stand out? What makes you unique, your USP?
Yes.
So it's got to be one of those platforms for us to reach out. Having said that, if we receive inquiries from our clients, they say they want an industry expert who can speak on this topic, then again, it's the credibility of that speaker who is known for a specific topic. He may not be famously known internationally,
Right.
but he's credible enough on a particular topic. That would be another speaker we may look for.
To add value.
To add value again. Ultimately, it's a speaker who will add value. There's also 2 types of speakers. I mean, we have speakers who we engage from a marketing purpose. Now, a marketing speaker, then the celebrity status is absolutely critical, because then it's the marketability. They want the photographs associated with the event. They want that speaker to say, I'm coming for that event, because that compels people to. If it's a ticketed event, it draws the crowd. If it's a buy-invite event to some VIPs, the VIPs then look at, oh my word, we're going to have the pleasure of speaking, seeing, interacting with that renowned celebrity. So that comes from a marketing engagement. If it's a learning engagement, then it's the content that's important. The celebrity status is a bonus.
Yes.
So really, you've got to understand, okay, what is my USP? Am I a speaker who's really famous? Then am I speaking because I am famous and I've got an influence online and offline? If I'm a content speaker, then am I a content speaker who's really well known as an authority in a specific area? And can I build my brand in one of the many verticals that I mentioned earlier? And if I can, that's just going to make me more marketable. Ultimately, we're looking for a speaker who's marketable, who can add value.
Interesting. I like that. So if somebody is, can somebody reach out to you saying, I would like to become a speaker, or I have authority in my industry and I want to share that knowledge? Is that something that you accept, or are you going out looking for speakers who can fulfill these roles?
So proactively, yes, we're looking for speakers based on our clients' specific needs in the region, both in the Gulf and India. And the requests are, versatile, from marketing reasons to learning reasons. And then we look for speakers either initially in our portfolio of speakers, or if they're out of that reach, then we reach out to speakers globally, depending on that need.
Okay.
Having said that, if there's a speaker who was looking to learn on how to become a professional speaker, or how do I build my brand, I have developed, and there are speaker coaches, I believe you also provide that service. So that's a service where we can provide knowledge over a 3-month journey, and telling them, how did Marshall Goldsmith become Marshall Goldsmith? He's written over 50 books, but only 5 of them are famous. No one knows about the
I
other
didn't
45
realize that.
books.
Yeah.
Example.
Yeah.
No one knows about the other 45 books, but his 5 books, in fact, What Got You Here Won't Get You There as a book, was the game changer. That 5x is his professional speaking fees in 1 year. His fees was X. It went up 5X based on that one book.
That's interesting.
So that's an example where the book was just went exceptional. But it was his 30th book when it just changed his fees. That's an example.
The power then of a book and a book which is connects with an audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yes, we're open to informally helping and giving advice to speakers who are there. I've worked with people who are confused between, can I be a trainer, a speaker, and a coach? Now, the answer, yes, you can. Yes. However, do you like to be known as one of those 3 specifically as a priority in your career? You know, is there a reason you want to have all 3? And when I've had those conversations with some people, they realize we really want to be a speaker, and coaching is something we enjoy doing. So we want a blend of both. And then you can use the speaking career path to incentivize your coaching journey as well.
Exactly.
Because you're then on stage to large audiences, and then you have a coaching business, which I look at training as something distinctly different, because training generally are 1 day, 2 day, or 6-month journeys, whereas coaching generally 1-to-1 or small groups over time, and speaking. So there are 3 distinctly different, but there are people out there who have the strength to do all 3, or some who are in a dilemma. Which one do I do? I'm a bit confused, and I feel I'm spreading myself too thin.
Yeah, but I think it comes down a lot to the why.
Yes.
Why do you want to be
Absolutely.
a speaker? And is it because you love to be on the stage, you're an extroverted personality, you're a natural performer, or is it because you want to educate, you want to give back, you want to share your knowledge, or is it some other reason you like the idea of being a speaker and having the freedom and to get out, meet people and travel?
Fantastic. No, absolutely. There's always different reasons, and really in coaching as a speaker coach or in form of questioning is really understanding, why do you want to be a speaker? And when you sit quietly and answer that itself will give you the clarity. Okay, how do I reverse engineer that purpose to actually, becoming a speaker? I have one specific person who wanted to be a speaker because he wanted to give back to the young leaders of tomorrow. So he said, I've got a 40-year career as a business leader. Yep. My purpose commercially is not, I'm not driven by that. I'm driven by contributing to the future leaders of the country. So that's his or her purpose in that case. So someone else was saying, I want to be a speaker to build my coaching business, because in the coaching business, it's sort of low profile. You don't know coaches unless you know them through word of mouth. But if I'm a speaker, I'm getting out there in the market and people get to know me. And then that helps my coaching business. Yeah. So
interesting you say that, because my guest who was on just previously before you is in the coaching space. And he reached out to me because he'd heard of me speaking at an event in London, and he thought I could add value to his event next month. So it definitely does work that way, that having the speaker opportunities then helps you to grow in your reputation in your space as a coach.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Who would be the biggest or most exciting person that you have brought into the region?
Wow, there have been some really great speakers. To pinpoint one is difficult, but if I pinpointed 3, if I may, and for different reasons, one of my all-time favorite was bringing Jack Canfield to the region. Jack Canfield is the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. Yes. So we hosted him for his first visit, and it was at Duck at the theatre.
At the Mall of the Emirates.
At the Mall of the Emirates. Yes. And it was 543 seats, and we actually had oversubscribed that event. And it was a full house, and it was really exciting. We partnered with Tim Hortons at that time. And you went into any Tim Hortons, the trays with Jack Canfield coming. Oh, wow. Chicken Soup for the Soul coming. So it was a lot of buzz, because he'd never been to Dubai. His books have been selling, they're timeless, and they've been selling for many, many years. And that was really special for us. And because he's really inspired a lot of people. And so hosting him was really special, and he was just a really wonderful human being. We toured with him throughout the Gulf and India 15 or 20 times. And we did the short events, and then he did a 1 day, and ultimately he had a 4-day retreat as well. So there are people who wanted a really deeper experience. So he was definitely one. Another of my all-time favorite, who's our longest-standing speaker partner, is Ron Kaufman.
Okay.
He's written a book called Uplifting Service. And what I loved about him and in the space of communication was really he had phenomenal stories. He brought a lot of humor in the stories. He gave examples relating to industries that everyone would apply. Banking, hotels, and flights. Everyone has stories and experiences of banking, hotel, and flights.
Yes.
So he used stories that had a universal interest. They were not abstract. They were not, you didn't have to imagine them because you could relate to those three industries. And he had some really good stories, good and in different experiences. And he articulated them with clarity, with energy, and humor. So they were memorable. So to me, people just loved him for his personality. And the content was simple, but yet profound.
Yes, yeah. Well, stories make things sticky. They make things memorable. And if you can tell a story in a way that captivates your audience and the audience can relate to it, then, yeah, you're on a winner there.
Yeah, and the third speaker would be Marshall Goldsmith.
Okay.
And we worked with him for the last 10 years. And what I love about him as a speaker, as successful as he is as humble as he is. And to me, when you build your brand as a speaker and you are sought after, without mentioning names, you can be easy to work with or difficult to work with.
Yes.
And what I really love and respect about him is he's one of the easiest and pleasurable people to work with. So, we went all out for him in every way possible beyond speaking. So when he would come down for an event, he would allow us the privilege of hosting a dinner with our best clients for arranging interviews. So what happens is then the speaker flies in. He does the event, but he creates additional intangible value before he or she leaves back, allows the person who's marketing and representing them to have even more conversations to invite them back again and again. So we've hosted Marshall Goldsmith, 10 to 15 events a year in the Gulf and India for more than 10 years.
Wow.
And that was because of his personality, his nature, and the value he added beyond the professional commitment of that event. And that's priceless.
That's actually valuable for people to hear. That's important.
Yeah, it is.
How you show up and your own personality and how you handle other people, relationships, connections is so important.
Yeah.
And that makes you memorable too.
Absolutely. I remember one story when Jack Canfield, we were in India. There was an event. There was about 700 people, and it was in the evening from 6 to 9 p.m. He stayed 2 hours to give everyone who wanted a photograph with him. And that was something that he did not have to do.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I said, wow, Jack, I'm really thankful because all these people are so happy. And he said, well, I don't know when I'm next coming to Mumbai. These people have spent time and money to be here. And I am who I am because they have bought my book and they've contributed to my success. The least I can do is to give them a photograph. And where are they going to share the photograph? Online.
Yeah.
Which further amplifies my relationship and my visibility. So that's another example where we've had speakers who leave the stage and they've left.
Yes.
And then, there's a vacuum because people have left feeling wanting more but not having had that photograph.
Yeah. You're a speaker yourself?
I would say I'm not. I've been on stage a number of times and sort of informally done an MC role. I have done a few keynotes around my book, Breaking Bread. So not something I do regularly, but I'm very comfortable on stage and I do enjoy it, but not something I've done consistently.
Okay.
I have done coaching in what I coach is solopreneurs who are, what I find is solopreneurs are even more lonely. They've sort of got hobbies and passions and they want to convert into business. So I have coached 10 to 15 solopreneurs. That's something I enjoy doing because I feel it's my way of giving back to people who are starting out or have got a hobby and they want to learn how to make it into business and share my wealth and experience. So that's something I do on a personal passion basis.
I mean, you've recently written a book, which I just happened to have. I walked in here and there's your book sitting on the side table there. So I thought, I've got to show this on the podcast. Tell us about the book, Breaking Bread.
Breaking Bread, yeah. So, I mean, for many years, my family and friends said, Gautam, when are you writing your book? And I was like, they said, you work with authors, you've worked with speakers, we'd love to see your message. And I was like, what would I write about, And I was actually invited to speak at a speakers conference in Goa a few years back. And at that conference, they said, Gautam, we'd like you to speak about how to build meaningful relationships, because we see you've spent time with CEOs, you've spent time with famous speakers, with sports personalities, and we've also seen you with family and kids. So we see you're versatile across all ages and across all seniorities. So I said, sure, I'll come along. And they said, because a lot of our speakers, not all of them are extroverts. In fact, quite a few speakers are introverts. And that's another topic on its own. And they're like, they're great on stage. Off stage, they actually are happier alone. Which surprised me about some of the speakers who have the biggest energy on stage, and off stage, they want to be in one corner alone. And you're like, wow.
I find that so interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's another topic. Yeah. So anyway, I invited, and I decided to come up, and I said, I've heard the term breaking bread when I was a kid, having been born and brought up in London. And I said, how about we call it Breaking Bread? So it's a bit of a catchy title, or memorable title. We went with that. And they transcribed my speech that I made, which I wasn't aware of.
Okay.
Shared that with me, and it became a mini version of the book that we have today. And I read, wow, I've got a transcript of a few thousand words. All I need to do is add some true stories. And I've shared 5 ways you can break bread. And that's how the book got created. And the essence of it is, I've hosted over 100 dinners with the support of my wife. Your home and my home are the most personal space in their life. And I've hosted, friends, clients with their spouses at home for dinner. And when they have a home-cooked meal, there's an energy exchange when you have food itself. Across cultures, you have multicultural people coming home to enjoy a home-cooked, let's say, Indian dinner. And there's a connection, there's a bond, there's a rapport, there's a trust. And so to me, I share in the book that wherever and however you communicate, whether it's over a meal, whether it's on social media, over WhatsApp, over email, in person, at networking events, when you communicate, how do you communicate? Do you communicate transactionally? Do you communicate, emotionally, with collaboration and abundance, and with a giving nature? And that's what breaking bread is to connect with emotion. So your communication is memorable and adds value, and you leave the person with a really good impression.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting, this word breaking bread, I didn't really know it.
Okay.
But I heard on the radio, I think it was only last week, they were talking about there is a movement in Dubai at the moment where you could go to people's houses there, and they call it breaking bread. And it's something stems from the UK, I believe, and they've introduced it here as well, where you go and you have dinner with people you don't even know.
Fantastic.
And you share connection and communication. And so I just found that so interesting that came up for me last week, and you've called your book this, and this is exactly what you're referring to as well. But it's nothing to do with you, that you're not involved in the breaking bread in Dubai.
I'm not, but I'm intrigued and that it exists. And it is something I experienced in Mumbai before, where there was a supper club kind of concept.
That's what they were calling it, a supper club.
And in fact, I was part of one here many years ago with a dear friend of mine, Phil Bedford, and we were 8 different people, and we'd meet and we'd rotate in each other's homes, and we'd cook the meal that day to everyone. That's one form of it. The other form is where you actually go to a particular venue. Actually, I've heard of one here where someone does, I think it's like Sri Lankan food or a specific cuisine, and people sign up to go for that home-cooked meal, and it's 8 different people who you don't know.
Yes.
And you literally are breaking bread over a meal in someone's home.
Yes.
And that's in essence the value of the book and what we share.
Yeah, I find that very interesting, and I think it's intriguing, and I'm curious maybe to give it a try sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We were talking about something earlier that I thought was really interesting, which is why I like to keep those cameras going at the very beginning of a conversation, because sometimes, because it's so natural, it just all starts to come out. And then you say, now we have to try and repeat that again later on. And it doesn't always work that way, the way you wanted it to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to know about the events that you run. What sort of scale are we talking about? Because when you had Marshall Goldsmith out earlier this year, I heard about it through the podcast studios here, but that was the only place that I heard about it. So how do you let people know about these opportunities, and how many people can come and join?
Sure. So, when we brought speakers, and, pre-pandemic, we used to run 6 events a year with these international speakers. It would be marketed on radio, newspaper, TV, email marketing, social media. and you would have anywhere between 100 to 400 people attending these public programs, entrepreneurs who would register themselves, and then you had corporate companies registering their senior leaders.
Okay.
And you'd have a mix of entrepreneurs and corporate leaders coming for these events. So those would be the open public, ticketed, registered events. Having said that, in recent years, we have not run our own public events. So we market in the same way in collaboration with event organizers in the region. So there's like example on November 16th this year, there's a gladiator summit that's been run with over 21 speakers over 2 days.
Okay.
Happening here at the World Trade Center. So two of our speakers are going to be there. One is Robin Sharma's son, Kobe Sharma.
Okay.
And also a famous cricketer called Robin Uthappa. Chris Fade is there. And numerous other eminent personalities are going to be there. And it's sort of like a mini TEDx format of a day of learning from 21 different speakers, 21 different subjects. So we are creating awareness on multiple platforms of that event. The recent visit of Marshall Goldsmith that you just mentioned, to be honest, that trip was really about him launching the MG bot. So what he did is we launched a bot at the Podsters, and we just had about 50 people coming, and that's really about Marshall leaving his legacy. As he said, that what happens beyond his lifetime as a speaker. He's now in his mid-70s. He's been speaking for 50 years, so he's created a bot which basically becomes your coach in his voice, in his avatar.
Oh, that's interesting.
So Marshall Goldsmith, .ai, and you will have a chance to ask a question, and it will be replied to you with his voice.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds really interesting. We'll put the link in the show notes for anybody else that can go and check that out. Great. So when we were talking about what makes a great speaker,
yes,
what makes a great speech?
Fantastic question. I mean, firstly, as a speaker, one needs to understand, is it a keynote of 30 minutes, 60 minutes? So understanding the time you have, because the time you have with the audience is also important to understand how you craft the message you share.
Of course.
What you will do for 30 minutes and what you do for 60 and what you do for 3 hours are completely different in terms of the style and the format. But let's look at a keynote as that's commonly known, between 30 to 60 minutes. It's a short amount of time, and you want to add tremendous value. When you have a half day or a full day, you have a lot more time, and they're more interactive. You have pauses, you have breaks, you have discussions at tables. It's the different format. This way, it's predominantly yourself. So what's most important with a speaker who's delivering a keynote message, firstly, is the first 5 minutes is your opening. And obviously, you have a message in the middle and your last 5 minutes. These are 3 ways that I look at it. So the opening 5 minutes is what can you do to get everyone's attention?
Yes.
Now, we've had simple things by asking a question and then raising your hand, so you get everyone to raise their hand. So supposedly the moment you're on stage, the audience could be on their phone, could be talking to a neighbor, various things. So how do you make sure you center everyone immediately is really key. And asking a question is one example. Another way is just starting and just standing there, like pausing for 30 seconds. And it's like, it may feel a bit awkward, but you got everyone's attention because there's a sudden silence on the stage. And you got everyone's attention, and then you open up. Start perhaps with a story. A story is always great because people love a good story.
Yes, I agree.
And the story obviously underlying would have a message which correlates to the theme of the event. So let's just say the theme is resilience, or the theme is, leadership to some extent, or future of leadership. You want to have a story in the beginning. You get everyone's attention. So they're listening to you, they're following the story, and it has a good message within it, which complements the content.
I also think it brings curiosity, because the story may not immediately feel like it's relatable to what the topic was going to be about. But when they can link that story back by understanding the underlying messages within that story and then link it back to the main message, then people go, and then they've got them on side.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you've got the middle part, and in that short time, one thing that I've seen, which has always worked, is saying a particular number. I've got 3 messages to share with you today. It's not mandatory, but I know it resonates because now people are looking out and listening out for 3 messages. Sometimes if you start sharing, you may lose people's attention. They're like, okay, how long is it? Where's this point? What's it? They're listening out. Now, I've got 3 messages that are going to impact your life, and you've got to note these down. So you've been telling them what to do. Like, listen out for 3 messages. and you've got to note it down.
Yes.
So they've heard that.
Yep.
Now their attention, like listen out for those 3 messages. Like you've given them the instruction, but you've given a specific number that's digestible.
Yep.
So that's another way to make sure you have their attention with a number and even prompting them, write down what your takeaways are.
Yep.
And then go and share your 3 takeaways relating to the topic. And then again, the closing is really important because that's the last memory when they have. Do you leave them stunned with another story, like emotional story that gets them, energized, an emotional story that connects with them, their feelings and thinking about the topic. So really
that's a case study which reinforces
it, some facts, some numbers,
Yep.
a story, a case study, some validation of what you've just shared.
Yep.
So that's really important. It's as I've simplified it, but really, ultimately, an opening to get everyone's attention, a middle content with an attention span, example of
educational
content, and then a closing so that you leave them wanting more and their curiosity, as you said as well.
Exactly. I teach actually 4 steps.
Okay.
And I call it the EI formula. So we need to engage them.
Yes.
And then inform.
Yes.
And then educate.
Yes.
And then inspire.
Fantastic.
So it just, it's basically the same. We're just adding in that one extra inform. Today you're going to learn after you've told your story or given them that question, that provoking question. Yeah.
And really got to understand, your audience. We've had speakers who've come from other parts of the world to India or Dubai and or the region in general. And, understand if it's a multicultural audience, you may at times need to go a little slower. Some of the speakers speak very fast. So you want to make sure you understand and know your audience. So the tonality, the energy on the stage, because especially the larger the audience, the more important energy is.
Yes.
Energy can make or break your speech.
Yes.
Whether it's 10 people, obviously your tonality and energy may be different, but assuming it's a keynote, it's generally 100 or more people. So you've got to make sure you have the energy to encapsulate people sitting at the back as well.
Not just stand there and speak to.
Absolutely. It's got to be, if it's just a monologue and you're speaking to the people in the front row, the people in the back are looking at their phones,
exactly.
leaving the room.
Yep.
And you're like, you lost the audience and,
Yep.
So energy plays a role, clarity of what you're saying, the speed of your speech, the tonality as well. Yeah.
So this is a lot of the area that I teach, and that's how we speak. It's not so much what we say. We're all experts.
Yes.
If you're up speaking, you're already an expert in your topic, but it's how you deliver that. And that's coming down to, I call it the 5 points: your pitch, your pace, your melody, your volume, and your tonality.
Yeah.
And all of those mixed together, they're like a mixed salad. You can play with them and you can add a little bit of more of this or bring it down, and pauses. We were talking about this earlier, the power of a pause.
Right, absolutely. The power of pause could be right in the beginning, as I mentioned earlier. It can also be during your speech. When you want to make home a point, many times I've seen a speaker repeat a point once. Repetition to reinforce it. Because if you're saying it a second time, they're like, oh my God, this must be really important that he's repeated that.
Yep.
And when you pause after it, you've allowed them to absorb that. Because whilst they're listening to a speaker, as they're hearing one point, you're speaking on the next one. Now, if you need to drive home a point, you just pause for those few seconds, and then that particular point sinks in and drives home a message. So these are small, I don't call them necessarily hacks, but these are small styles of delivery that really engages, inspires, as you said, and captures the essence of the message you're trying to share with the audience.
Yeah. And do you believe that people should learn this skill? Is it something which is naturally gifted, or is it something we can learn? I know my perspective on this, but I'm curious to know your perspective.
Yeah, I think everything from a speaking perspective can be learned, in my opinion, and it comes with the experience. Yeah. We will all have our natural speaking style, and the speaking style can be adapted with certain, like the pause or numbers or the energy or the tonality once you're aware, because we don't know what we don't know. Now, as a speaker, if I know my natural style is X and I know I need to make a few tweaks to make it even more compelling, and I've experienced that or I've been informed of that, then with that awareness, I'm now inspired to make those small changes. Yes. I can't dramatically change. My core delivery style may be one, but I think at least hypothetically 20% people can customize, which comes through learning and experience and education.
Even accents.
Oh, yes.
And even accents amongst native English speakers.
Right.
Because the Australian can be really difficult to understand when you've got the broad or the Scots where they speak Kelly.
Yes.
But you have to modify a strong accent and slow down and enunciate more clearly.
Yes.
And you have to consciously do that at the beginning when you're learning this or creating a new habit in the way that you speak, so that you can be intentional when you speak.
Right.
And you don't just speak, but you're intentional in how you come across.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
No, I think this is such an interesting topic. When you've had some speakers out here, are there any that, yes, they've got great content, they've got great value, but the message isn't coming across as well as it should be because they're not naturally a good speaker or they haven't worked on their skills? I think authors in particular. I mean, I know of an author, I can't remember the name of the book or the author, to tell you the truth, but he had to significantly work on his voice because he would lose his voice speaking. He had to do so many speaking engagements. He would actually lose his voice because of the way he was speaking. And so he went for voice training to be able to help him through all of that. And it made all the difference in his presence and be able to connect with audiences. Have you experienced, obviously we're all different, as you said, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, I will, obviously mention, for example, recently we had a really good coach who is also an author of a book, and we brought him for a conference because his book was popular and he was well known as a coach, and they were looking for a speaker on that topic. It was a half-an-hour keynote. Now, to me, his content was great, but the delivery style lacked energy. It lacked a story, and the opening and closing felt like disconnect, and the audience would have lost interest in that, and therefore it has not helped his the event after the event in terms of you getting inquiries or in terms of you getting. So it just suddenly fell flat. And when he has had a call with me and asked me, said, "How was the experience?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to share feed forward with you," as Marshall calls it, but really, the content, I would like to acknowledge that the content was actually really good. The slides were great. They were visually appealing. But the delivery style, I saw a lot of people on their phones, which means you did not engage their attention, and you did not, the energy or the tonality and the storytelling, that really was, missing.
So it was honest feedback.
Yeah, I shared that with him. So he realized that if he wants to continue that, he will really have to work on his speaking. And if he's uncomfortable upping his game as a speaker, which is possible, we can't, as you said, can't be forced to do it. But he realized now, I'm not going to be invited back. If I change my speaking style, if I can and I'm interested, then I will prioritize that. Right. Or he will find another journey. Like if he says he can't, if a speaker came to me and said, "That's not my core, but we're working together with him as a coach," I'll say, run small masterclasses. Yeah. Because that same content delivered to 20 people would work, and that will still get him, if he's speaking to improve his coaching career. He's not speaking to become the world's greatest speaker or to build his speaking profession. Right. Therefore, he better to speak to an audience size that will align to his energy and tonality, as opposed to 200 people in the room and you're disengaging. Yeah.
How does somebody who's just starting out get visibility as a speaker?
Yeah, another good one as well. We have a lot of speakers. In fact, some are really well known as well in other parts of the world, but they're not known in Dubai. So when speakers approach us, the one way, whether it's in this market or in their local market, and they're looking to say, how do I build my exposure, credibility, build my experience from that. And really there are a lot of associations in every part of the world, from a Rotary to business councils to associations, and they are always looking for guest speakers. So they'd be very open and receptive. Obviously there's no commercials involved. They'll be open and receptive to inviting you as a guest speaker, and that gives you the practice. Obviously, you've got to be competent, yes, but you don't necessarily need to be world class because there's no commercials involved. And you provide those in short 20, 30-minute keynotes, and then you build up a portfolio that you've spoken at 3, 4, 5 events. You also realize, what did the audience enjoy most? Did they laugh? Was the story engaging and inspiring? And that is like a coach. A coach does many hours of coaching at no fee to build their credits and their experience. So before they're charging, they've had a good experience, they've had testimonials, they've had credibility before they become a certified coach and get paid to be a coach. So the same way in speaking, look for an opportunity to speak at universities. There's an business schools.
Yeah.
So there's no shortage of places to speak, and you can connect with people on LinkedIn, over email, or through referrals, and speak at these audiences and build your sort of credibility.
Yeah, exactly. And then eventually you need a showreel or...
The showreel is really, really important. I mean, to me, when we offer speakers, the showreel is absolutely critical. I mean, you could have a great profile. People say you've got a good book, perhaps, you've got a great profile, you're being recommended. But again, the video, we want to see how you speak. What's your clarity, your tonality, your energy,
engagement.
your engagement, your accent, all these things. Will this work with our audience?
Yes.
It doesn't mean you're a good or a bad speaker, but we need to think that we know our audience.
Yeah.
And the speaker's showreel is most times than not the deciding factor. Obviously, once you've got the budget in place, the topic and the credibility, the showreel is the deciding factor.
I like the speaking arena. It's very connected to the acting, singing, performing arena. And the things that you're talking about.
Yes.
If you want to go out, my background is as a singer. If you want to go out and get booked as a singer, you need to have a showreel. And that showreel will obviously do what it does, showcase what you're capable of and get you those gigs booked. Yeah. Same as an actor. And it's the same as a speaker. But I think speakers, they don't like to consider themselves as being in an acting or a performing world. But really, they are.
Absolutely.
It's performing.
Yeah. Marshall Goldsmith always says, it's showtime.
It's showtime. I
mean,
love
he literally says it. When you go to a play or a concert, if that person is unwell or had a bad day or has had an argument at home or whatever's going on in their lives, they need to show up on stage as that personality and enact that role and block that out. The same thing with a speaker. When you're on stage, it's showtime. Yeah. It is, you need to be the best version of yourself and park aside whatever's going on in your personal life. Yes. And that cannot impact your things. So yes, absolutely. It's showtime. It's showtime.
I like this conversation because then you were talking about introverts before, and when they come off stage, they're actually wanting to be with themselves, but they're able to switch it on as we're talking showtime. And there's a lot of rituals that some people will go through before they go out on stage. And I know it's different for everybody. Have you noticed speakers going through their own rituals backstage before it's showtime for them?
Yes, I've seen many a speaker would request us to say, the 15 minutes before they go on stage, they'd like to be in a quiet space. So they want to, I guess, center themselves, silent their minds. Because the last thing a speaker would want, or would I recommend, is they're in a busy conversation with someone and they're suddenly within a minute going on stage, because that entire conversation is now consumed in their minds, and it could and very likely impact their opening. Yes. Whereas when they've got a clean slate of being centered, even for 5 minutes to 10 minutes of doing nothing, when they are then on stage, they're able to, go with a clean slate. So the 5 to 15 minutes before stage, most speakers say, we'd like to be in a quiet space alone. So that's really important as well.
Do you want to know what I do?
No, please.
I go into the bathroom and I sing. Because what that does is, obviously warms up my voice, but it gets me in a happy space that releases dopamine and endorphins and makes me feel, like I'm present, and it gives me energy as well. So I'll do that for maybe 15 minutes before it's showtime, and then I'll have some quiet time to reflect on what I'm going to be sharing, and then I'll go out.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great.
You've written a book, and you say you're not a speaker. You like to speak at events. Do you see yourself doing more speaking now that you have the book?
Personally, for me, I don't see that as currently as a priority for me, but in time to come, it may become, something that I look forward to doing. For now, I look at it as the book is for me, an opportunity when I meet people, I'm networking or going for meetings, it is a much better version than a business card. Is now people said, oh, you're a author of a book on building relationships. They understand that I value relationships. Relationships are very important to me. Whether we do business together or not, I value our time. I value the content, the value of the conversation we're having, and really value, the exchange. Now, when they read the book, I've had the best compliment I've had from someone who read the book is, Gautam, I've just met you once, and after reading your book, I want to work with you. And he was a speaker, a renowned speaker in India. He said, I just feel your vulnerability and your authenticity and your journey in why you do this business has compelled me to say, however it is, I want to work with you. So that way the book has helped me build credibility, authenticity, and build relationships with people. And it's nice to be able to gift that out in my line of work. And I have had the pleasure of being interviewed more than 25 times because of the book. So when you write a book, you also have the pleasure of being in interviews like we have today.
So true.
So that's a good sign. And people know that, be it on my profile on LinkedIn or when they meet me, Gautam, you're all an author of a book. So they'll say author, coach, entrepreneur. So it adds another credibility designation to yourself that you're also an author, which is a different sign of respect and credibility.
Yeah. Aside from your book, are there any books that you would, or is there a specific book that you would highly recommend?
I've read quite a few books. So, it's, every book has a different purpose. One book is Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, which focuses on doing the biggest things and most important things first. So that really helps with procrastination. Marshall's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Again, the title itself tells you what got you where you are today in your life will not get you where you want to go. And he highlights 20 habits that we need to change to be a better version of ourselves. So again, that had that learning.
That's on my reading list now after this.
Great. And one of my favorite books is called The Fish Philosophy, which is, the subtitle is Work Made Fun Gets Done. And to me, again, that's really important. You and I, and most people spend more than half their lives at work, maybe 70%. Now, if you're going to spend 70% of your life at work, whether it's as a speaker, coach, or as a business leader, or as a professional, you should enjoy your workspace and the people you work with. And the Fish Philosophy explains that bringing fun into the workplace is actually great for productivity, business, and happiness. And so to me, this is about a fish market in Seattle where they sell more fish per square foot than anywhere in the entire United States. And their fish is more expensive, but they create an experience when you buy the fish.
Okay.
So people go there just because of the experience. So that's another great book that I recommend.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll put the links in the show notes to these books if anybody's interested to go on and read them. But I want to say a huge thank you for coming and sharing your stories and communicating. And it's been incredibly valuable. And I know my audience are going to find it hugely valuable as well. Thank you so much, Gautam, for being on the show.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and look forward to staying connected. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Impact Through Voice podcast. Now, if you've reached the end of this episode, then it means you're enjoying the podcast. So I have a quick favor to ask. If you haven't yet subscribed, please go and do it now, and even leave us a review, because it really does help us so much to reach more people and impact more people. And I would be very, very grateful. Now, I love to read all of your comments about the show and what you're enjoying, what you would like to hear more of. So please take the time and go and do that now. When you do that, please take a screenshot and then tag me on Facebook or Instagram. That's Lisa Hugo Official. Now, I'm going to be sure to share your post, and I'm also going to private DM you with a thank you. And it also means you won't miss an episode. And as a subscriber, then you're going to get access to more content that we don't even open up to everybody. So thanks again. And until next time, keep on working towards your goals and making a positive impact on the world with your voice.